if you can keep your microphone on mute. That would be
yes, should do that.
okay. And so let me just say to those who will be watching this on video later that we're continuing our reading and discussion of the stories in James Joyce's The Dubliners. And today we will begin with this third story, Araby. And it's possible we might actually get to the following story as well, Eveline. But our target is not to rush through, but to read the stories in a skilled manner and have a good discussion about them. And that being said, we have our reading list up, and I will begin the reading of Araby. So, Araby, North Richmond Street. Being Blind was a quiet street except at the hour when the Christian Brothers School set the boys free. An uninhabited house of 2 stories stood at the blind end, detached from its neighbors in a square ground. The other houses of the street, conscious of decent lives within them, gazed at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. The former tenant of our house, a priest, had died in the back drawing room. Air, musty from having been long enclosed, hung in all the rooms, and the waste room behind the kitchen was littered with old, useless papers. Among these, I found a few paper-covered books, the pages of which were curled and damp. The Abbot by Walter Scott, The Devout Communicant, and the Memoirs of Vidocq. I liked the last best because its leaves were yellow. The wild garden behind the house contained a central apple tree and a few straggling bushes, under one of which I found the late tenant's rusty bicycle pump. He'd been a very charitable priest. In his will, he left all his money to institutions and the furniture of his house to his sister. Next, please. Joan, you need to, there you go.
Yeah, I just did. Thanks, Duncan. When the short days of winter came, dusk fell before we had well eaten our dinners. When we met in the street, the houses had grown somber. The space of sky above us was the color of ever-changing violet, and toward it the lamps of the street lifted their feeble lanterns. The cold air stung us, and we played till our bodies glowed. Our shouts echoed in the silent street. The career of our play brought us through the dark, muddy lanes behind the houses, where we ran the gauntlet of rough tribes from the cottages to the back doors of the dark, dripping gardens, where odors arose from the ash pits, to the dark, odorous stables where a coachman smoothed out, combed the horse, or shook music from the buckled harness. When we returned to the street, light from the kitchen windows had filled the areas. If my uncle was seen turning the corner, we hid in the shadow until we had seen him safely housed. Next, please.
Or if Mangan's sister came out on the doorstep to call her brother in to his tea, we watched her from our shadow peer up and down the street. We waited to see whether she would remain or go in, and if she remained, we left our shadow and walked up to Mangan's steps resignedly. He was waiting for us, her figure defined by the light from the half-open door. Her brother always teased her before he opened, and before he obeyed, and I stood by the railings looking at her. Her dress swung as she moved her body, and the soft rope of her hair tossed from side to side. Donna.
Every morning I lay on the floor in the front parlour watching her door. The blind was pulled down to within an inch of the sash so that I could not be seen. When she came out on the doorstep, my heart leaped. I ran to the hall, seized my books, and followed her. I kept her brown figure always in my eye, and when we came near the point at which our ways diverged, I quickened my pace and passed her. This happened morning after morning. I've never spoken to her except for a few casual words, and yet her name was like a summons to all my foolish blood. Thanks, please.
Her image, her image accompanied me even in places the most hostile to romance. On Saturday evenings, when my aunt went marketing, I had to go to carry some of the parcels. We walked through the flaring streets, jostled by drunken men and bargaining women, amid the curses of laborers, the shrill litanies of shop boys who stood on guard by the barrel of pigs' cheeks, the nasal chanting of street singers who sang "Come All You" about O'Donovan Rosa, or a ballad about the troubles of our native land, or a ballad, I guess. These noises converged in a single sensation of life for me. I imagined that I bore my chalice safely through the throng of foes. Her name sprang to my lips at moments in strange prayers and praises which I myself did not understand. My eyes were often full of tears. I could not tell why, and at times a flood from my heart seemed to pour itself into my bosom. I thought little of the future. I did not know whether I would ever speak to her or not, or if I spoke to her, how I would tell her of my confused adoration. But my body was like a harp, and her words and gestures were like fingers running upon the wires. Anne.
One evening, I went into the back drawing room in which the priest had died. It was a dark, rainy evening, and there was no sound in the house. Through one of the broken panes, I heard the rain impinge upon the earth, incessant needles of water playing in the sodden beds. Some distant lamp or lighted window gleamed below me. I was thankful that I could see so little. All my senses seemed to desire to veil themselves, and feeling that I was about to slip from them, I pressed the palms of my hands together until they trembled, murmuring, oh love, many times. Next, please.
At last, she spoke to me. When she addressed the first words to me, I was so confused that I did not know what to answer. She asked me, was I going to Araby? I forgot whether I answered yes or no. It would be a splendid bazaar, she said. She would love to go. Why can't you? I asked. While she spoke, she turned a silver bracelet round and round her wrist. She could not go, she said, because there would be a retreat that week in our convent. Her brother and two other boys were fighting for their caps, and I was alone at the railings. She held one of the spikes, bowing her head towards me. The light from the lamp opposite our house, opposite our door, caught the white curve of her neck, lit up her hair that rested there, and falling, lit up the hand upon the railing. It fell over one side of her dress and caught the white border of a petticoat, just visible as she stood at ease. It's well for you, she said. If I go, I said, I will bring you something. Next.
What innumerable follies laid waste my waking and sleeping thoughts after that evening. I wished to annihilate the tedious intervening days. I chafed against the work of school. At night in my bedroom and by day in the classroom, her image came between me and the page I strove to read. The syllables of the word Araby were called to me through the silence in which my soul luxuriated and cast an Eastern enchantment over me. I asked for leave to go to the bazaar on Saturday night. My aunt was surprised and hoped it was not some Freemason affair. I answered a few questions in class, I watched my master's face pass from amiability to sternness. He hoped I was not beginning to idle. I could not call my wandering thoughts together. I had hardly any patience with the serious work of life, which, now that it stood between me and my desire, seemed to me child's play, ugly, monotonous child's play. Next, please.
On Saturday morning, I reminded my uncle that I wished to go to the bazaar in the evening. He was fussing at the hall stand looking for the hat brush and answered me curtly, "Yes, boy, I know." As he was in the hall, I could not go into the front parlor and lie at the window. I left the house in bad humor and walked slowly towards the school. The air was pitilessly raw, and already my heart misgave me. When I came home to dinner, my uncle had not yet been home. Still, it was early. I sat staring at the clock for some time, and when its ticking began to irritate me, I left the room. I mounted the staircase and gained the upper part of the house. The high, cold, empty, gloomy rooms liberated me, and I went from room to room singing. From the front window, I saw my companions playing below in the street. Their cries reached me weakened and indistinct, and leaning my forehead against the cool glass, I looked over the dark house where she lived. I may have stood there for an hour, seeing nothing but the brown-clad figure cast by my imagination, touched discreetly by the lamplight at the curved neck, at the hand upon the railings, and at the border below the dress. Next, please.
When I came downstairs again, I found Mrs. Mercer sitting at the fire. She was an old, garrulous woman, a pawnbroker's widow, who collected used stamps for some pious purpose. I had to endure the gossip of the tea table. The meal was prolonged beyond an hour, and still my uncle did not come. Mrs. Mercer stood up to go. She was sorry she couldn't wait any longer, but it was after 8 o'clock, and she did not like to be out late, as the night air was bad for her. When she was gone, I began to walk up and down the room, clenching my fists. My aunt said, "I'm afraid you may put off your bazaar for this night of our Lord." Next, please.
At 9 o'clock, I heard my uncle's latchkey in the hall door. I heard him talking to himself and heard the hall stand rocking when it had received the weight of his overcoat. I could interpret these signs. When he was midway through his dinner, I asked him to give me the money to go to the bazaar. He had forgotten. "The people are in bed and after their first sleep now," he said. I did not smile. My aunt said to him energetically, "Can't you give him the money and let him go? You've kept him late enough as it is." My uncle said he was very sorry he had forgotten. He said he believed in the old saying, "All work and no play make Jack a dull boy." He asked me where I was going, and when I had told him a second time, he asked me, did I know the Arab's farewell to his steed. When I left the kitchen, he was about to recite the opening lines of the piece to my aunt. Next.
I I held the florin tightly in my hand as I strolled down Buckingham Street toward the station. The sight of the streets thronged with buyers and glaring with gas recalled to me the purpose of my journey. I took my seat in a third-class carriage of a deserted train. After an intolerable delay, the train moved out of the station slowly. It crept onward among ruinous houses and over the twinkling river. At Westland Road Station, a crowd of people pressed to the carriage doors, but the porters moved them back, saying that it was a special train for the bazaar. I remained alone in the bare carriage. In a few minutes, the train drew up beside an improvised wooden platform. I passed out onto the road and saw by the lighted dial of a clock that it was 10 minutes to 10. In front of me was a large building which displayed the magical name. Next, please.
Susan, you'll have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Sorry. I could not find any sixpenny entrance, and fearing that the bazaar would be closed, I passed in quickly through a turnstile, handing a shilling to a weary-looking man. I found myself in a big hall girdled at half its height by a gallery. Nearly all the stalls were closed, and the greater part of the hall was in darkness. I recognized a silence like that which pervades a church after a service. I walked into the centre of the bazaar timidly. A few people were gathered about the stalls which were still open. Before a curtain, over which the words Café Chantant were written in coloured lamps, two men were counting money on a salver. I listened to the fall of the coins. Remembering with difficulty why I had come, I went over to one of the stalls and I examined porcelain vases and flowered tea sets. At the door of the stall, a young lady was talking and laughing with two young gentlemen. I remarked their English accents and listened vaguely to their conversation. Next, please.
Okay. Joan, why don't you go ahead? You have to unmute yourself, though, Joan.
All the time. Oh, I never said such a thing. Oh, but you did. Oh, but I didn't. Didn't you say that? Yes, I heard her. Oh, there's a... Observing me, the young lady came over and asked me did I wish to buy anything. The tone of her voice was not encouraging. She seemed to have spoken to me out of a sense of duty. I looked humbly at the great jars that stood like Eastern gourds at either side of the dark entrance to the stall and murmured, "No, thank you." Next, please.
The young lady changed the position of one of the vases and went back to the two young men. They began to talk of the same subject. Once or twice the young lady glanced at me over her shoulder. I lingered before her stall, though I knew my stay was useless, to make my interest in her wares seem the more real. Then I turned away slowly and walked down the middle of the bazaar. I allowed the 2 pennies to fall against the 6pence in my pocket. I heard a voice call from one end of the gallery that the light was out. The upper part of the hall was now completely dark. Donna.
Gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with anguish and anger.
Right. Yay.
I hate this
good.
story.
Oh, please elaborate.
Don't hold back.
When I was a little girl, I was horse crazy. And this poem, The Arab's Farewell to His Steed, was my favorite poem. So it was funny to find it here in this story because has anybody else ever heard of that poem? I thought it was not well known. I still remember the first line. Tamara was a dainty steed, strong and bold, of noble breed.
Yes.
Can you remember the name of the poet, John?
Well, it's here. The Arab's Farewell to His Steed.
By?
I do not remember.
Caroline Norton, 1808 to 1877.
Yeah.
Apparently it was a poem that was recited a lot, so it must have been taught in school.
Yeah, it was. I think it was we had a textbook of poetry when we were about 10 years, 12 years of age. I'm sure that was in there. I remember it. Now, I couldn't even remember, certainly wouldn't know the author, and I couldn't remember a line out of it, but I remember that idea of an Arab and a steed.
Yes.
So it certainly, as Donna says, it was around.
Yeah.
Lovely. Nice to make that connection, Joan.
It was fun. Yes.
So in context, it's amusing that the uncle, who was probably slightly inebriated, hears that he's going to Araby, and the first thing that he can think of is this poem, and he's going to recite it. So he's got it by heart. He's learned it, and I think Donna's right. It was probably one of those that was learned and recited. And as Joe mentioned, it was in textbooks of the period. And small consolation to the boy.
Yes.
Is this a story of young love? Very young love.
Awakening.
Yeah.
He seems to have been very angry with himself for feeling the way he did. His vanity.
Yeah, I think he's frustrated by the whole experience, and he does take it out on himself. But he's obviously a very hypersensitive young man.
It's so accurately portrayed.
Yeah.
I mean,
Haven't we all been in a situation similar to that?
Yes, I know. Well, I know I have. I can't speak for everyone, but
Well, I recognize his tenacity. If he were to stop for a second, even before he leaves his house, he would realize this is a fool's errand. It can't possibly work out. It's too late now. What if I miss the train? What? There was so many reasons where he should say, forget about it. Try another time. But he just keeps going forward, going forward, going forward. It's 10 o'clock, for heaven's sake. But you get yourself moving and you can't stop.
he's obviously read a lot of King Arthur and all of those chivalrous stories. I mean, so this is his quest. It's not his own idea. He had no intention of going to the bazaar, but it's because his ideal female, his love, mentioned it. So it's something he's going to do for her, and that spurs him on, even though probably deep down he knows there's no. It's kind of it's too late to do. But
it's called hoping against hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this go back to the word paralysis that we have discussed before as a theme? Because he does seem paralyzed. He's been waiting a long time to make a move. And when I say make a move, I mean just to speak to the girl.
Yeah.
And then when the opportunity presents, it's too late. So he's frozen.
Yeah.
But he did try. That's one
did.
thing. He is trying. And this sounds like his first serious infatuation. And he was lurking about, and of course, then the sister spoke to him.
Yes.
And he wanted to continue that, so that's why he would have promised that whole thing.
And she is dressed in brown.
Right.
And
which is probably her convent uniform, her school uniform.
Yes, she's probably a little older than him, perhaps, but she's still a schoolgoer.
Yeah.
But it's a medieval romance, as Bill was saying. It's a rewriting, a medieval romance in a modern setting. This is the quest for the Holy Grail writ in modern terms. And the something for her is the Holy Grail.
Right.
And then the journey begins. Well, first of all, he has to be able to make the journey, and you have all these obstacles put in his way. What was it? He has to ask permission to go, ask leave to go, and then hope you're not beginning to idle. Some, the school teacher says, and it's all difficult. But eventually, he gets to make the journey. But he arrives in a wasteland. The beautiful Araby is in, they're winding the clocks and kind of cracking open the glass of wine, people that'll be working there, and they're all sweeping the floor and putting the chairs up. And this is the magic land he was to go to in Araby. And the dial on the clock, do you see the hands on the clock? 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, second last page. I passed out on the road and saw by the lighted dial of the clock that it was 10 minutes to 10.
10 minutes.
The grown-up hand is passing the childhood hand. See? You see? Now that comes from Fritz-Sen, not from me. And at that stage, he realizes the quest for the Holy Grail is a nonsense, and he's angry with himself as a creature driven. That's the standard ending to those sort of.
Right. But he would undoubtedly do it again.
Oh, sure. Don't we all? Do we ever learn? But I think it's fantastic the way it's written into childhood.
Yeah.
And you can see all those. I used to hate this story. And as you can see, someone explained it to me.
It's upsetting. It's an upsetting. Well, all these stories are upsetting.
But it's so very well observed, and I think well remembered by Joyce.
Yeah.
Just the whole, and we've all, we were all children. We all have done this, where you try really hard to make it look like you're accidentally meeting someone. Like you follow them, and just at the last minute you cut in front of them and say excuse me or something. It's like I mean we've all done that.
This is waiting for the school bus. She's going to be on. You let 4 buses pass, and then you're early and you're late and you're in trouble. It's.
I had a crush on a girl in grade school. Well, who didn't? But I mean, probably about 11 or something. I was 11, maybe 12.
Yeah.
We were in the skating rink below the school, and I'd been hanging out there, and I noticed that she was walking. She was going to be coming this way, so I just got up, and she only ever said one word to me the whole time I knew her, and I just passed her and I said hello, and she looked at me and said queer. And that was it.
Never forgotten, huh?
Yeah, all these years later. Unforgettable.
Yeah, I've got several memories in my mind of events from when I was like 12 or 13. And just as ridiculous. But, I think I want to point out the fact that he doesn't really seem to realize it, but he actually learned something about getting to the bazaar late. Because he's seen after the theater. It's kind of like if you've ever been involved in any theater, there's the stage presentation, and then there's after it's over. And the audience has gone home, and anybody who happens to be straying about, they just get to see, the regular life. So the shop girl, she's tired. She's been there selling stuff all day, and this is her chance to, flirt with a couple of guys, and they can flirt with her, and so I think he's kind of seen behind, just like with his infatuation with the girl. He sees her when she's on stage.
Yeah. Actually on stage, on the steps of the house. Yeah,
she's on stage, and she's and as everybody else when we grow up, and at a certain point, hopefully, we all learn that everybody has their stage presentation, and then they have their offstage presentation. And in order to actually have an enduring relationship, you have to understand both.
You have to go backstage. Yeah.
Well, but it all begins with not knowing anything about the other person at all. I mean, it's typical of that age, of that period in a young person's life. He has courage. He has good intentions. Honorable intentions. He's going to do something nice for her because he likes her. He doesn't really understand why he likes her. He just knows that she's special to him in some way. And his limited experience of women, obviously, she's the only girl of a certain age on his block, apparently, that he could have some kind of attraction to. So, and I'm not sure, I don't see her as being particularly false. Like she's not.
No.
She's not putting on an.
This has nothing to do with false.
She's just living her life.
Yeah.
This guy. So, at the great Donna and I at the great Dubliners course, the Joyce Centre, they gave us an article. They gave us a certain amount of background material, and they gave us an article on the history of Araby bazaars.
Just tell me, yeah.
And it was interesting that some of them were run by the Freemasons.
That's why they aren't asked.
That's not the Masonic one, and I just speed read this. I didn't really like it, but it kind of. I wish I'd read it properly. But there seem to have been three different types of Freemasons at one, and there was some charitable organization at another, and then Dublin City seemed to be doing one, and so he wasn't going to join the Masons.
I thought that was a rather curious remark.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
And
now I understand it.
Why mention that empty house at the end of the street? It doesn't seem to figure in the story.
I think it was there in reality at the Richmond, North Richmond Street. There was an empty house there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it just sets.
When Joyce lived there, yeah.
Just set a scene.
Yeah.
There was a guy called Kavanagh, I think, who had bought all the houses on that street when they became available, so that he could let them out. We're called lets to pretty well-off people. I mean, when the Joyces arrived there, the street was on the turn, but at the end of the street there was this big house, which was essentially two houses, and the owner had turned it into a garden. And I think the garden went all the way down to the River Liffey. But again, if I recall from what Joe referred to there, that name Mangan from across the street reflected an actual person that he would have known. So these characters are all very real characters. But
Mangan would also have been, of course, the name would be James Clarence Mangan, whom Joyce really liked, and he gave 2 papers on him in 3S, so it might be linked to that as well.
Yeah.
But around the corner,
I think there's a mention of that, Tom, in the story, is there? About
the girl, yeah. But around the corner, I think too, very close to North Richmond Street, there were the Boardmans.
Yes, that's right.
That figure in Nausicaa.
I think in number 1.
Yeah.
Which was opposite.
Yeah.
There's
both those houses.
Just one thing, guys.
the house.
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah, there's
the house at the end of the street right there.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. We had this is a little book that was produced some years ago, and we actually had the author of that, Michael Quinn, that did the presentation on the story, and he spoke about his researches. and various aspects of the house. And it was very good. He produced a photograph of the Christian Brothers School, the other side of the street. You know, this I think this side here, correct me, Tom, if I'm wrong, and this side was where Joyce, the story is set, I think. And
That's
then
correct, yeah.
Christian Brothers School was here. But the photograph of the Christian Brothers show, someone commented, among the students coming out, two of them are punching each other, you know, accidentally.
And there was also the fact, Joe, that Joyce didn't recognize that school in his in the details of his CV. He sort of left it in history and moved on to tangos and to Belvedere.
Yeah.
So he wasn't proud of his time there.
A Christian Brother boy.
Yeah. Didn't want to be called such.
So there you get Tommy and Judy Caffrey's mother, basically, you know, isn't it? Or no, not mother, but is it mother? Yeah, Edie Boardman. Yeah.
Edie Boardman is the
sister. Yeah. So it does tie in. It does tie in, but
it does. It also helps to. I mean, having that empty house, big empty house at the end of the street, gives you a sense of his. Again, a paralysis. It's a blind street. It's not a through street. So it's there's no exit. So his experience is very limited. I mean, he only ever sees the kids on that street. Nobody goes by going anywhere else. So, you know, it does help to give you a sense of the mood, and it to me, it adds something to the story.
Yeah, but you could only leave it by going back the way you came. And there's your paralysis, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
In this
case, it's almost a metaphor for the boy too, because he's like emptied after all of this trip to the fair. He's bereft in a way.
And he has to pay. He has to pay more than he thought he had to pay.
He had to pay a shilling instead of sixpence.
And he has to. Everything. There's obstacles in all directions, you know. And also the fact that he's actually sitting in the train on his own. You know, nobody comes into the carriage, and
or to tell him nobody's traveling.
Well, it's because nobody's stupid enough to go to the fair at this late at night. I mean, he's the only passenger.
But you have to learn those lessons, don't you? You learn the hard way. Boys especially learn the hard way, don't we?
Yeah.
But I like that section where he's waiting for the father to give him, or the uncle to give him the money. And he says, I went upstairs, and he went up to the rooms and he started singing, he said, and he felt liberated in the empty rooms. You know, that's before he ever left the place. I think that's a lovely touch, kind of, by you know, he was
I just looked up Araby in the dictionary, and it refers back to Arabia, to a section that is a desert region. So that if you knew that when you're reading it, it's also, you know, vacant and I mean, every word of Joyce just ripples with meaning, whether you know it or not, you know, but it's there.
And
Richard Ellman identified the particular bazaar, apparently. And it took place between the 14th and 19th of May, 1894, in aid of Jervis Street Hospital. And the bazaar's theme song was, I'll sing these songs of Araby.
Right.
It has a romantic overtone, doesn't it, to us anyway?
It does. Yeah. And then the staff have English accents, even they're exhausted.
That was John McCormick used to sing that. I think he actually recorded that. I'll sing these songs of Araby. It was a very popular song of the period, late 19th century. And this was when Orientalism was the thing.
Yeah, it was exotic.
It was exotic.
Mhm.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That's
Mhm.
the whole thing, and people are going. It attracts them as something different,
Yeah.
even though you know.
Yeah, like nowadays, well, my generation, you sort of, I'm going to live in Tibet. You get there, discover the reality of they don't have toothpaste.
That fixes you in a certain time frame, Joe.
I have fixed it.
I got as far as Ladakh. I got up to I got up to Kashmir and Ladakh. I made it. But
I got as far as Dunleary.
Did you not have the shilling for the boat? No.
Don't encourage me.
I don't. This particular story, I do not see as a total story of paralysis. I mean, he is trying, but of course, he's frustrated at every turn.
That's
So perhaps this is incipient paralysis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that sort of the story of Ireland at the time, too, being under the British? Like, as much as you try, you're going to be thwarted.
well, that's part of. I think that could be looked on as a metaphor of sorts. I mean, Joyce feeling the pressure of the church and the British rule. This boy is absolutely under the control of his uncle, who, it's just a whim. I mean, he could change at any moment, and he's either going to give me the money or he's not, or he's going to forget or he's not. He has absolutely no possibility of any action of his own. He's dependent, entirely dependent on other people.
Yes, at their whim, as they say, at their whims, even when they promise something.
Yeah.
You know, when you're that age, you're so insignificant that they basically think nothing about breaking what they promised.
Yeah.
Children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah. You've no income. You're depending on whatever pocket money, and it's very easy to lose out on that.
The sad thing is, I mean, had he actually succeeded in getting something, I think it would have even been a sadder story to have him go to Mangan's sister and she'd say, well, what's that for?
Yeah.
All right. I don't want that. I wanted to go to the fair. I don't need, what's this junk? I don't need this piece.
Yeah.
I don't want anything from you.
Right. Yeah.
Really, I think you
That would
probably
be
say, well, that's
really
very sweet
piercing.
of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or he gives it to her and then sees her putting it in the dustbin.
Right.
Yeah.
That kind of.
We're all very cynical.
We could all write our own. We could all write a new ending.
I tell you, it'd be very hard to rewrite that, wouldn't it?
Yes.
It's just so well written.
Yeah.
Well, look at the first interaction where she speaks to him.
Yeah.
Where they're outside, there's apparently a fence there, and she's either older and taller than he is, or she's kind of stepped something because bows her head towards him.
Yeah.
But he's already in a subservient position for some reason. And then she speaks to him from that higher position.
Yeah.
Well, she's on, I mean, it's like the row houses or whatever that Bloom has to enter. There's a railing and then there's a little
spiky
couple of steps.
Yeah, and so there are steps going up to the entrance, probably 3 or 4 steps. She's on the landing.
Yeah.
And so he's on the street level. So he is looking up to her.
Yeah, and she's talking down to him.
Yeah.
And she's up there giving orders. She's telling Mangan to come in for his tea.
Right.
And she speaks with the full authority of her mother, presumably, The guys are on to nothing. It's terrible to be that age.
And she asks him if he's going to the bazaar, and like he couldn't even remember if he said yes or no. I mean, like, really, did I say yes or no?
Yeah, flustered.
Couldn't remember, what did he even say to her if he was talking nervously at her and couldn't remember what he'd said to her.
Yeah.
Joyce was only one of the words, and just going back then to the other line about the harp, that's just his adoration of her, but my body was like a harp, and her words and gestures were like fingers running upon the wires.
Yeah.
For a young,
Very romantic.
very romantic altogether.
But it does such a good job. I mean, if you're infatuated or you think you're infatuated with someone, you're looking for some way to contact with them and to please them. So every little word, every little idea, you're searching. In this particular case, she provided him what he wanted. He spent days in a daze thinking about the possibility of going to Araby, and was so distracted that his teacher talked to him about it, his mother talked to him about it. So.
And just him looking at the window at her, I just kind of think of Joyce looking at the window at what's her name, Martha in Zurich, as an adult, remember? But he was like spying out this window at her, and but here's this young fella, doing it, so it just kind of reminded me of that years later,
He's lying on the floor.
On the floor.
And he's got the blind pulled down, and he's only got an inch, so he's kind of got he can see without being seen, and it's kind of very strange behavior. Behavior in a writer in Zurich. Very strange.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Shall we go and perhaps read Eveline? I don't know if we'll have time to actually talk about it afterwards, but we could always, we could do a first reading.
Yeah.
Let's just read, and then if we don't get much time to talk about it, we want to do a quick refresher next time. So, all right. So I believe that Donna was the last reader. So Katrina, let's go to Eveline.
Okay, Donna, you didn't read a whole lot. Do you want to start this?
Sorry, Katrina. No, you go ahead, please.
Okay. Eveline. She sat at the window, watching the evening invade the avenue. Her head was leaned against the window curtains, and in her nostrils was the odor of dusty cretonne. She was tired. Few people passed. The man out of the last house passed on his way home. She heard his footsteps clacking along the concrete pavement, and afterwards crunching on the cinder path before the new red houses. One time there used to be a field there in which they used to play every evening with other people's children. Then a man from Belfast bought the field and built houses in it, not like their little brown houses, but bright brick houses with shining roofs. The children of the avenue used to play together in that field. The Devines, the Waters, the Duns, little Kehoe the cripple, she and her brothers and sisters. Ernest, however, never played. He was too grown up. His father used to often hunt them out of the field with his black thorn stick. Usually, little Kehoe used to keep Nix and call out what he saw when he saw his father coming. Still, they seemed to have been rather happy then. His father was not so bad then, and besides, her mother was alive. That was a long time ago. She and her brothers and dead sister were all grown up. Her mother was dead. Tizzie Dunn was dead too, and the Waters had gone back to England. Everything changes. Now she was going to go away like the others, to leave her home. Next, please.
Home. She looked round the room. reviewing all its familiar objects which she had dusted once a week for so many years, wondering where on earth all the dust came from. Perhaps she would never see again those familiar objects from which she had never dreamed of being divided. And yet, during all those years, she had never found out the name of the priest whose yellowing photograph hung on the wall above the broken harmonium, besides the coloured print of the promise made to Blessed Margaret Mary Alakeek. He had been a school friend of her father. Whenever he showed the photograph to a visitor, her father used to pass it with a casual word. He's in Melbourne now. Next, please.
He had consented to go away, to leave her home. Was that wise? She tried to weigh each side of the question. In her home anyway, she had shelter and food. She had those whom she had known all her life about her. Of course, she had to work hard, both in the house and at business. What would they say of her in the stores when they found out that she'd run away with a fellow? Say she was a fool, perhaps, and her place would be filled up by advertisement. Miss Gavin would be glad. She'd always had an edge on her, especially whenever there were people listening. Miss Hill, don't you see those ladies are waiting? Look lively, Miss Hill, please. She would not cry many tears at leaving the stores. Next.
But in her new home, in a distant, unknown country, it would not be like that. Then she would be married, she, Eveline. People would treat her with respect then. She would not be treated as her mother had been. Even now, though she was over 19, she sometimes felt herself in danger of her father's violence. She knew it was that had given her the palpitations. When they were growing up, he had never gone for her, like he used to go for Harry and Ernest. But she was a girl. Because she was a girl, but latterly he had begun to threaten her and say what he would do to her only for her dead mother's sake. And now she had nobody to protect her. Ernest was dead, and Harry, who was in the church decorating business, was nearly always down somewhere in the country. Besides, the invariable squabble for money on Saturday nights had begun to weary her unspeakably. Next, please.
She always gave her entire wages, 7 shillings, and Harry always sent up what he could, but the trouble was to get any money from her father. He said she used to squander the money, that he had no head, she had no head, that he wasn't going to give her his hard-earned money to throw about the streets, and much more, for he was usually fairly bad of a Saturday night. In the end, he would give her the money and ask her, had she any intention of buying Sunday's dinner? Then she had to rush out as quickly as she could and do her marketing, holding her black leather purse tightly in her hand as she elbowed her way through the crowds, and returning home late under her load of provisions. She had hard work to keep the house together, and to see that the 2 young children who had been left in her charge went to school regularly and got their meals regularly. It was hard work, hard life. But now that she was about to leave it, she did not find it wholly undesirable life. Next.
Lois, are you here? You're going to have to turn on your microphone.
Sorry about that. She was about to explore another life with Frank. Frank was very kind, manly, open-hearted. She was to go away with him by the night boat, to be his wife, and to live with him in Buenos Aires, where he had a home waiting for her. How well she remembered the first time she had seen him. He was lodging in a house on the main road where she used to visit. It seemed a few weeks ago. He was standing at the gate, his peaked cap pushed back on his head and his hair tumbled forward over a face of bronze. Then they had come to know each other. He used to meet her outside the stores every evening and see her home. He took her to see The Bohemian Girl, and she felt elated as she sat in an unaccustomed part of the theater with him. He was awfully fond of music and sang a little. People knew that they were courting, and when he sang about the lass that loves a sailor, she always felt pleasantly confused. He used to call her Poppins out of fun. First of all, it had been an excitement for her to have a fellow, and then she had begun to like him. He had tales of distant countries. He had started as a deck boy at £1 a month on the ship of the Allen Line, going out to Canada. Next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've lost the place. I started reading a footnote. Sorry. Next.
He told her the names of the ships he had been on and the names of the different services. He had sailed through the Straits of Magellan, and he told her stories of the terrible Patagonians. He had fallen on his feet in Buenos Aires, he said, and had come over to the old country just for a holiday. Of course, her father had found out the affair and had forbidden her to have anything to say to him. I know these sailor chaps, he said. One day he had quarreled with Frank, and after that she had to meet her lover secretly. The evening deepened in the avenue. The white of 2 letters in her lap grew indistinct. One was to Harry, the other was to her father. Ernest had been her favorite, but she liked Harry too. Her father was becoming old lately, she noticed. He would miss her. Sometimes he could be very nice. Next, please.
And do you want to read now?
Okay. Not long before, when she had been laid up for a day, he had read her out a ghost story and made toast for her at the time. Another day, when their mother was alive, they had all gone for a picnic to the Hill of Howth. She remembered her father putting on her mother's bonnet to make the children laugh. Her time was running out, but she continued to sit by the window, leaning her head against the window curtain, inhaling the odor of dusty cretonne. Down far in the avenue, she could hear a street organ playing. She knew the air. Strange that it should come that very night to remind her of the promise to her mother, her promise to keep the home together for as long as she could. She remembered the last night of her mother's illness. She was again in the close, dark room at the other side of the hall, and outside she heard a melancholy air of Italy. The organ player had been ordered to go away and given sixpence. She remembered her father strutting back into the sick room saying, "Damn the Italians coming over here." Next.
As she mused, the pitiful vision of her mother's life laid its spell on the very quick of her being, that life of commonplace sacrifices closing in final craziness. She trembled as she heard again her mother's voice sing constantly with foolish insistence, "Deravon, Saron, Deravon, Saron." She stood up in a sudden impulse of terror. Escape! She must escape. Frank would save her. He would give her life, perhaps love too. But she wanted to live. Why should she be unhappy? She had a right to happiness. Frank would take her in his arms, fold her in his arms. He would save her. Next, please.
She stood among the swaying crowd at the station at the North Wall. He held her hand, and she knew that he was speaking to her, saying something about the passage over and over again. The station was full of soldiers with brown baggages. Through the wide doors of the sheds, she caught a glimpse of the black mass of the boat, lying in beside the quay wall with illumined portholes. She answered nothing. She felt her cheeks pale and cold, and out of a maze of distress, she prayed to God to direct her, to show her what was her duty. The boat blew a long, mournful whistle into the mist. If she went, tomorrow she would be on the sea with Frank, steaming towards Buenos Aires. Her passage had been booked. Could she still draw back after all he had done for her? Her distress awoke a nausea in her body, and she kept moving her lips in silent, fervent prayer. Next, please.
A bell clanged upon her heart. She felt him seize her hand. Come! All the seas of the world tumbled about her heart. She was drawing her into them. He was drawing her into them. He would drown her. She gripped with both hands at the iron railing. Come! No, no, no. It was impossible. Her hands clutched the iron in frenzy. Amid the seas, she sent a cry of anguish. Eveline! Evie! He rushed beyond the barrier and called to her to follow. He was shouted at to go on, but he still called to her. She set her white face to him, passive like a helpless animal. Her eyes gave him no sign of love or farewell or recognition. Oh, I could kick her.
That's very harsh.
But even so, this is a period of time when Argentina and Brazil are conspiring for genocide of all the native Indians that lived in the countries, so they could westernize the land.
Yeah.
So you think, okay, he could be taking her to a life of middle class splendor by the exploitation of the resources there, or he could be setting her up for a life she'd never want.
It could be a white slavery situation.
Exactly.
There were many, many stories,
Exactly.
true or untrue, of young women being seduced by whoever and taken to some foreign country and exploited.
Right.
So no,
We just had a movie in Cleveland at our Cinematheque, and it's called Colonus, for the colonial people that went to South America. And I looked it up on YouTube afterwards. It's if you see it, it's, oh my God, it's quite the film about how the genocide took place and then the resettlement by the Western peoples. But I looked it up and it was mostly true. All the references of the film were documented.
Oh yeah, no, it was
So Colonus, it's up for an Academy Award this year.
It's not there anymore, is it, Anne?
No, this was a Cinematheque film.
Oh, Cinematheque, not theaterly.
Cinematheque.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like one of those things I've seen that I wish I had not seen because it was so gruesome,
Well, getting back to this woman's decision.
Yes.
Is it really, it can be one of two things. She's realizing that this is a stupid thing to do, or she's just scared shitless to do it. And it's two totally different motivations.
Yeah.
Well, it is a big unknown for her to, go off, travel across the Atlantic or whatever water to get to South America. I mean,
but her life at home is awful.
Yeah, it is.
I find it interesting. She manages to find some pleasant moments to remember. Her father reading to her.
That was her excuse to herself.
Yeah, she doesn't want to go, maybe, and so she's bringing these good memories back. So is the decision not to go really that she doesn't want to leave, or is that she's afraid of what will happen on the other side?
Oh, I think
that's what paralysis is for her.
Yeah.
I mean, the devil in the blue sea, I think it's called.
I think there's as much. We can't discount the fact that she made a promise to her dying mother.
Yes.
I
Her
mean,
beastly mother.
that factors into it, I think,
Yeah.
a great deal. It's not so much about her desires or fears as it is her duty. And then she realizes, well, things aren't really all that bad. I mean, and they don't seem to be all that bad. Her father's not the greatest father, but he doesn't seem to be absolutely the worst either. I don't think I don't, and I
define your terms here, Bill. I mean,
I
he's
come-
terrible.
well,
Yeah, but
it's
only when she's grown
relative.
up. Yeah.
He doesn't beat her with an iron poker, at least.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's one thing in his favor. He doesn't.
Not yet.
But it
I wonder
says that
if-
but Joyce says that the brothers, when the brothers were at home, they took the brunt of the father's anger, and then he starts in on her when
Yeah,
the
but
boys
lately
have
he
left
began to
home.
threaten her.
Yeah.
And he'd have
I wonder, is there a clue? Sorry, go ahead. I wonder, is there a clue in the phrase "going to Araby"? Because that was also a phrase that meant going into prostitution. And did she feel that when she got to the boat that this is what was facing her? And she decided, as bad as her life was, she wasn't going to allow for this to happen many thousands of miles away in a place that she had never seen before.
I have a different read. Everyone is so quick to say, "Oh, Frank, he must have been taking her sell her into prostitution, or he just wants to get her away to Liverpool and then leave her." The guy comes home, he meets a girl, he falls in love. Look at Joyce. How long did he know Nora? Hardly a day, a week. And he managed to convince her to give up everything, not get married, get on a boat, go to England, and then go to Europe. It's just love has you do different, very crazy things. It's not the most rational thing. And yes, there are stories, and yes, it does happen where bad things happen to good people who trust people, but not all people you trust are going to sell you into slavery.
But the thing is,
But that's the
you
beauty
don't know.
of the story is we don't know.
We don't know. And
Right.
and so it could be either or, like so much of Joyce's stuff. It could be
That's
either
right.
or.
That's right. But why does everyone always jump to the dark side? I think that's a very late 20th century, 21st century reading of Joyce. Everybody jumps to the dark side about these boys and the priest. He must have been abusing this child, or it's like. And the encounter, this old guy, he's just a pederast, a pedophile, it's ambiguous. All of his writing is ambiguous. He doesn't spell it out. He doesn't tell you, but most readers are really quick to pick up the darkest possible outcome.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's warranted, really, but
I think this is overall, though, even before we get to the Frank part, there's a lot of darkness in this story.
Have you any thoughts on the mother's words, make you up Irish, Derry Vaughan, Sarah on? The end of pleasure is pain.
It's pain.
Yeah, Araby is a story of light and almost heavenly compared to this story. I mean, the boy for most of the way is, really expected. He's awkward and goofy and all that. But this story starts off dark and sprinkles a lot of darkness along the way before we even meet Frank.
Yeah.
So, he's kind of leading us, in my opinion. He's kind of leading us into looking at the dark side of things.
Yeah.
Not that he's saying this is the reality. He's just saying, I'll tell you a little thing. This is kind of off the topic, but when the German death camps were finally released, and there were a lot of children who had been born in the death camps, and they were taken out and they were, processed and all that stuff. And then there was a psychologist, sociologist that went back and tracked some of them down. And what they realized was that for those children born in the death camps and staying there for years, that was their view of how society worked.
Yeah.
And when they were released, they didn't automatically change that view. No one had ever processed them in that way. So, anybody who's raised in a kind of dark circumstance, of course, we all have ideas of heaven, but there will still be these heavy concerns.
Yeah.
So,
I think if Joyce's theme is paralysis, Eveline, when she's looking back, like their father only took him to, was it Holt or wherever, once. I think she's looking for an excuse not to go.
Yeah.
And that's her paralysis. She's just thinking about the 3 or 4 times in her whole life that something nice might have happened.
right.
I
And there
agree.
are children there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
If that's the case, I think it has as much to do with the fact that she doesn't really love Frank. I mean, Frank's a way out of a bad situation
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
she's mad head over heels in love with him. He's maybe the first man that's paid a lot of attention to her. He likes the fact that he treats her well. He's kind. Everything we hear about Frank is this guy's a saint. He's a really, he's a nice guy. He's got money. He can leave Buenos Aires and come back on a holiday. Not an inexpensive thing. He's doing really well. I mean, what he's doing in Buenos Aires, who knows? But be that, there was a huge Irish population in Buenos Aires. There were a lot of Irish
Sure.
people there. So there was like a little Irish town there. And so he, it wasn't as if she was going into a completely foreign country where she would not be able to speak the language or anything like that. She would, but she just doesn't love him enough to do it.
She doesn't ruminate on anything about him, really. We have a broad picture of him, but she has all these details about her brothers and her mother and father, but not her relationship with
have
Frank.
hope with him.
Yeah, you'd think she would have, thought about some nice things he did with her while he was ashore in Ireland.
Well, he did. She does. She said she took her to the theater to see the Bohemian Girl.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to Duncan's point about being on stage. Frank has been on stage, and that all she has seen is his stage presence. And I think, Susan, just going back to, a lot depends on what that mother is saying. Sharon, what that might mean. And there's a school of thought that it means Daru the wine. One mistake.
The deriving thing. I have a thing here saying it's the end of pleasure is pain.
Well, I don't know how that is right.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
That's pretty. I don't know. That's a stretch. I think it seems to me it's meant intentionally unintelligible because she's dying and she's not really. She's just babbling.
If that was to mean one mistake, then Eveline is a nomen of her mother, because she was obviously an Irish speaker as a girl, as a young woman who moved to a big city and ended up in a violent relationship. And here it is happening again, a nomen, a small part of the same diagram, heading off for a big city, and that's where her doubt comes from, But it all depends, as Susan said, what on earth those words mean.
We're never to know.
I'd love to see scholarship.
All I could say is that the on would mean that it's an a fada at the end. So
see, you have so many regional accents as well. And it was actually P.J. Murphy as well. It was his belief that it was Daru the one. And like I say, I'd love to see some scholarship on it. I've never Googled it or looked up JSTOR. I must do it immediately before bed. See.
Well, I get the impression that this relationship with Frank is a fairly short-term thing. It's not like he's come to Ireland and they've hung out together and then he left and then he came back again, and
Oh, no, no, no.
It hasn't
it's
mattered.
one continuous short relationship, right?
Yeah, he's home for a holiday, and that's you know, they
But she
meet,
hasn't,
and then he spends as much time as he can with her while he's there. But
yeah.
it might be
I
what
think that's companionship that she's
maybe
enjoying.
maybe a fortnight, maybe 10 days, who knows?
She
Mhm.
hasn't met his people or anything, you know? You must come and meet my mother and father, sort of thing. It doesn't seem to have happened unless I missed it in the text.
Yeah, I saw no
Well,
indication of any of that sort of stuff. So, I mean, all she sees is what Frank presents,
Yeah, freedom.
and he could be entirely sincere.
Mhm.
This is the thing that makes the story work so wonderfully in a sense. He could be the finest guy in the world,
Yeah,
but I mean, she's coming from a kind of dark place, and it's not um surprising that she would be reluctant at the end.
yeah.
So, Anne, you were talking about colonialism and
Mhm.
farmers. Argentina in the 1890s offered
Mhm.
the second sons of farmers land
Oh, yeah.
if they went to Argentina.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And apparently there's still about 3 million people of Irish descent in Argentina from that, among other things. But you were saying that they cleared all the land. Well, it was for second sons of Irish farmers.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that would make sense. Mhm.
yeah. That was happening all over. There's a large in Sao Paulo. There's a huge Japanese community um, that have been there for, I don't know, 100 years or so. That were like second sons, who were not going to, they decided to take a chance. But they usually went in groups, and they usually knew other people who were going. So that's a different type situation. But yeah, I mean, we were wiping out, like the Jesuits in Paraguay
Mhm.
wiped out most of the native population. And this was the Jesuits. They wanted to clear the land of people to allow, Europeans to come into Paraguay.
Mhm.
So, I mean, these things happen.
They did happen.
Hmm.
there's also a very large Welsh population in Argentina. There was a lot of emigration to Argentina in the late 19th century from the British Isles,
Hmm.
because of course it would have been Ireland was part of the United Kingdom. It was not independent Ireland. These aren't Irish people with Irish passports. These are British citizens benefiting somewhat from British colonial practices, though Argentina certainly was not a British colony. But the whole second son thing is because they're not going to inherit the land, so that there's nothing else for a second son to do except uh, emigrate
Mhm.
Or become a priest.
or become a priest. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm. Well,
We see the Irish names being repeated now in the Argentinian soccer team and rugby team,
Yeah.
which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
There's a guy, I think, playing for Liverpool at the moment, and he's
Yeah.
Mac something or other.
Hmm.
I don't think he recognizes any Irish blood.
hmm so what's the deal? I think there's multiple times more Irish outside of Ireland than
Yeah,
within.
the diaspora, it's called.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 45 million Americans claim Irish heritage.
Yeah, I've read that. Mm-hmm.
And wasn't it an Irishman who organized the Argentinian Navy?
Yeah.
I can't say the name. Yeah.
Who organized what?
The Argentinian Navy.
Oh,
Argentinian.
Was that Thomas J. Marr? There's a bridge called after him in Waterford.
Yeah, yeah.
Maher was someone who was there's a name, Maher, transported to Australia, to Tasmania, and he
Yeah,
gets and
maybe
he
that's-
escapes. Yeah, he escapes and he comes to America,
Yes.
and he fights in the Civil War, and he's looking for soldiers from the war who would go back to Ireland and fight the British.
He also became a newspaper man, and I think he was the first governor of Montana.
He was, and there's a huge statue to him in Montana in front of the.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he couldn't go back to Ireland himself because he had been transported. And I didn't realize this, but you didn't go off to Australia and serve your penalty or
No, it was a lifetime.
incarceration. You could never come back to to Britain. You were not allowed back, and
well, that was true of those that were transported to the colonies, including the United States. It was transportation for life.
That's
And
right.
if you set foot back on an Irish soil or British soil, even the Scots were transported after the Battle of Culloden. Many of them were sold into indentured servitude, but it would be for life.
It was a crime to go home again.
Yep.
William Brown. I just looked her up. William Brown was the guy that.
That's right, Tom. Yep.
Yeah. He was from Foxford, County Mayo, but I think he fought in some kind of war over there, but became regarded as the founder of the Argentine's Navy. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it seems like we actually got through 3 stories today.
Yeah.
Just feel so sorry for women back then because, like, she's looking at her mother's life, the life, what was it, of commonplace sacrifices, so whether she goes or whether she stays, like, she's not really hopeful of a very happy life, whichever way she goes, really, but he would give her life, perhaps love, like she's not, it's only a possibility that marriage, it's only a possibility of love and romance, so. And then the duty, that really, what is her duty? Should she stay? Should she go? But it's just that women back then, like, I don't know. You're a single woman, and then you're either looking after the elderly father and the younger children, or you might, just going into a marriage that you might necessarily be happy in. It's not easy.
This, I think, a lot of this is modeled on Joyce's sister, who was in that actual position. She's the one, Maggie, who is in the Ulysses. We hear she's the one home stirring the pot, washing the clothes, making sure, going to get some charity soup for the kids and keeping her father in tow as best she can. So that was something Joyce was well aware of and knew firsthand as well. Both the dying mother, the brutal father, the put upon sister, and the bleak existence that was available to her, to this sister of his. And I don't think a lot of people sometimes criticize Joyce for not doing more for his family and being sort of callous and unfeeling in that regard. And I think he tries to talk about that with Stephen Dedalus in his sense of being drowned. No, I can't save them. They'll pull me down with them and we'll all drown. So, it's like he justifies it, or he managed to explain it to himself anyway. He has to, for the sake of his art and for the sake of his life, he has to leave Ireland. And he leaves his sister behind to do this, to have not much of a life. And in fact, I think he actually asks her to come over and help with his kids, which she does. I think she spends about a year in Trieste and then can't take it anymore and goes back to Ireland.
Yeah. And another of her sisters does. Eileen does move over, and
yeah,
in a way, he brought Dublin with him. He brought one of his sisters and his brother.
Yeah.
But I would think that if the people who are running the little review and the egoist, if they read Dubliners ahead of accepting, yeah, let's talk to this guy. They must have seen a lot in a story like we've just read, because
Yes.
his previous name was New Free Woman. It was a suffragette supporting magazine, and that was the reader base. And say, yeah, this guy writes like we believe, This is what Susan just described. And you can sort of see that aspect of it too. And, he wasn't just writing, he could easily have written romantic nonsense, sort of, love solves everything, and all this, but he didn't, he was writing reality. Interesting.
And in a certain way, weird. He was the Eveline that went to Buenos Aires.
Yes. Yeah.
And it worked out.
Yeah. It kind of worked out, yeah. Well,
it worked out in the sense that he wrote marvelous books, and I assume anybody who can write books like that had a marvelous internal life, if it was not necessarily
tough
bright
road.
lights, sunshine all the time.
Yeah.
So I guess if I were going to come down on anything, if Evelyn's life was as described, at least there would have been a chance if she had gone to Buenos Aires, it could have turned out differently. But that's based upon my own prejudices and
yeah, it's some chance against no chance. When you weigh it like that, like she doesn't seem to have any work options. She has no. She's no, like, even if she could get out of the situation with the father, she's no way of earning an income other than looking for, dare we say it, maybe some sort of job in a hotel, cleaning, or something like that. And she doesn't seem to have typewriting skills, or so like her options here are very, very bleak.
Well, I think the expectation of her father that she turn over all of her earnings to him. I mean, that's the patriarchal nature of 19th century Ireland, and maybe 20th century Ireland for that matter, but or 21st century Ireland. But yeah, so she's she's obviously capable of holding down a job and working, taking care of the home. So in other circumstances, she might have gone off on her own, perhaps, but there's really doesn't seem there's much possibility of that in Dublin in those days. A single girl would be suspect of many things. If you didn't have a family, if you weren't staying with your family, what's wrong with you? And maybe Nora had to deal with that as well in terms of how people at Finn's Hotel looked at her, or thought about her. Here's this country girl come up to the city. I guess that was fairly common But she's on her own.
Story.
Yeah.
Well, I think there are a lot of stories that could be told about women in those days. For instance, going to England, they would have been servants in the big houses, and to the men, they were available.
Yeah.
There's many stories of the women getting pregnant and drowning themselves in the rivers, but I'm not sure the stories are as that they depict as the story as many as would have been affected by that kind of stuff.
Well, I think just as many Irish girls came to the United States and ended up in service here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the big houses.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them did okay.
Yeah. My mother was from Ireland. I've mentioned it, and there were 7 of the family of 15 kids that came to America. But for as hard as they had to work, the women would ride the trolleys, Bill, up and down Fairmount Boulevard, going to the big houses in Shaker Heights, and they became strong friends for life. They loved each other. They had a companionship that was unbelievable and rich, very, very rich.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of them did well in America, really, when you think about the circumstances they came from and the homes they put together and the welcome they had for the Irish who came after them. And anyway,
because we've two of them in Ulysses. We've Mary O'Driscoll, which is taken as a sort of a humorous interlude almost when you're reading it. But think of Mary's point of view, and then the silent lady, young lady next door to the Blooms, who was buying sausages in Douglas. So there's 2 of them, and we know nothing about them. I have more respect for Miss Garden Brush, isn't that what Mary O'Driscoll says?
I'm just waiting for a kettle to boil here, but I was just going to say she doesn't really seem to have much of an idea other than there's a home waiting for them, but we don't really know anything about the life that's, is she going to be in the home and then he's going to go off sailing again? Like, there's no talk of their future life together, what it's going to be. Yeah. And there's a mention of the dread, what was it, the Patagonians, the terrible Patagonia, there's nothing. We're not given a lovely picture like of this new life in Argentina, just a home, and that's it.
Well, it's a marriage, isn't it?
So there's no great expectation of what that's going to be.
There's no business plan at all there.
No.
It's just a dream ticket. If it works, it's wow.
Some people that maybe take the darkest view of Frank think, well, he's like the sailor in the cabman shelter. He's just telling tall tales. Because those stories of the fierce Patagonians go back to the Middle Ages, to the early explorers talk about one-footed beings with one eye, and So is Frank really from Buenos Aires? That's the question that a lot of people raise. Has he just been filling her head with stories about Buenos Aires? But if you take him at his word, he's no longer a sailor. He's landed on his feet in Buenos Aires. He's off the boats. He's on holiday. So he's not going to go back to sea. He's either got a shop, a business, or a position somewhere in some firm in Buenos Aires, and probably a nice little home. And now he's of an age where he's thinking about finding a wife and starting a family.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, there'd be so many immigrants coming into Buenos Aires at this point. It would be easy to have a middle class life of in business.
Right, which you probably would not know anything about, though. This is the whole thing.
Yeah.
And as anybody with a little experience in this best of all worlds knows, that even with knowing for many, many years who the other person is, that marriage is still fraught with develops.
Yeah.
And to be, I don't know how far it is from Ireland to Buenos Aires, but I know it's a long way.
A
Three
long
thousand.
way.
Yeah.
And to get over there, I mean, I assumed that like all people wives get together and talk about what their expectations were and how things have actually developed. And, I mean, people have a wide theoretical knowledge of marriage and of relationship. So, if she came to me and asked her for advice, I would probably say, you know what, it's a bit of a shot in the dark, but what have you got to lose?
Oh dear.
Anyway, she didn't go to Buenos Aires anyway. So,
Nope.
she
So funereal, though, isn't it? It's like the black mass of the boat, and then the
yeah
long
yeah.
mournful whistle. Like it's
Yeah.
And I
like.
think
Well, of course, to emigrate was, that it really is the ending of one life and then choosing another, because back then, if you emigrated, you wouldn't go back again, probably, so
No.
mourning your previous life, so.
She's like a helpless animal, and that is the cattle boat they're getting on to Liverpool.
yeah.
Oh.
So,
I think the image of the boat, and where he describes the image of the boat waiting in the waves.
yeah.
I mean, she was ready to go. She had the letters written and all, but I think that kind of panicked her a bit. And there are overtones, of course, all the time about Joyce and Nora going off,
Yeah.
are kind of things about, whether Joyce thought maybe Nora wouldn't turn up or wouldn't go, like, this kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And didn't he have his family waving him off and she nobody? Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't his father looking for him to stop it?
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
My goodness.
Anyways,
Very nice.
Anyway,
Whatever.
I think there are two lovely stories to read together.
Yeah.
There's a tone about them that's kind of this kind of failure or something. Well, I suppose you could say that of them all, but they're so short and precise and condensed. And Joyce was dealing with something he knew inside out, and he does it so beautifully. There's beautiful sentences in both of the stories, apart from whatever the meaning and so forth. There's absolutely beautiful sentences in the English language there, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Just the end is just so sad. Just, there's no tears. There's no, I can't, there's no, it's just nothing. Like she leaves, imagine him looking at her and there's nothing. There's no apology. There's no, just, that's so sad. Like,
Well, she's totally paralyzed.
Yeah.
In her response to him. Yeah. And
there's nothing to stop him getting off the boat, and saying, look, okay, you've got a nervousness with this. Let's talk about this. We'll see if we really want, and we'll talk about it further. To stop him coming down that gangplank and saying, yeah, well, look, let's try it here then,
Except perhaps he may have to be back at Buenos Aires at a certain point. He's only on holidays, so he's got a job there, and he's got to get back.
It's not.
But you're right. You're right. If it was, if he was truly in love with her,
you say, look, okay, maybe I've been a bit hasty with this. Let's at least talk about this and see how you really feel, and then I'll catch tomorrow's boat. It doesn't have to go.
I think that's an excellent point.
It would have spoiled the story
Aye.
Yeah.
Folks, I'm going to say good night because I must go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
So,
And nice to see you, Susan.
Oh, thank you, you too.
Yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah.
just, so when you mentioned Fritz Sen earlier, I popped over to Zurich just there on a Thursday. And I had read, but did you read in the papers or online or anything that he got a presidential award by President Higgins for his services in Ireland for all his Joycean work, you know? So when I saw that, I just had presumed that that he was sent the award or something. I didn't actually think that he had flown back to Dublin because I thought his days of coming back to Ireland were over given his age. But he did come back for the 2 days, you know. So
Who are you talking about?
I'll say this is Fritz Sen. So he's in Zurich. He's 96 years old.
Oh.
He's not an academic or anything. Like he was in college, but I think he dropped out or something. But he's I think he's probably the most esteemed Joycean, really. What would you say, Duncan? Yeah, his
very
knowledge.
mellow fellow.
He's just an amazing person. I've been wanting to meet him for the longest time, and I thought, right, I'm just going to go. And yeah, just the foundation is amazing. The collection of about 5,000 books, you know, all related to Joyce or. Obviously, then there's other, you know, say like Homer and different other books as well that have a connection to Joyce. But everything. I mean, he's got an antique Jacob's biscuit tin, you know, that like from 1904, you know, and just all the amount of, like, it's just a treasure trove. But he is just so engaging and lovely and generous with his time. You know, he's amazing man, you know. So so yeah, he's there Monday to Friday, and then Thursday he leads the reading of Ulysses, and then after that then there's Finnegan's Wake as well, you know. So amazing.
Wow. Great.
Anyway, he wants PJ to go over, so I was telling PJ that today, you know, that come on, you have to get better soon now because we're invited over to Zurich, you know.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they're going to have met before, you know, but yeah. So
okay.
Right. So
it was nice to see you.
Yeah,
you know what I'm wearing? You know what I'm wearing? The
What are
ring
you
from
wearing?
the cake. The ring from the cake.
No. Oh, that's so funny. Oh, bless.
It was funny to find it. I got, oh no.
Well, I was petrified. I said I must remember to tell them, and I was imagining that, you know, somebody would end up with a chipped tooth or something because I forgot. Oh,
sorry,
wrapped in its white paper. I caught it, and the bread was delicious. Well, I'll see you next week.